SiriusXM keeps truck drivers informed and entertained with coast-to-coast coverage across the U.S. and Canada. Listen to what you love from anywhere on the road with 24/7 ad-free music plus sports, news, talk, and comedy. Hear your favorites on every haul for just $6.06 a month. Sign up at SiriusXMFleet.com. Welcome to The Long Haul, the podcast dedicated to empowering small carriers and owner-operators to drive their business forward. I'm your host, Adam Wingfield, bringing you insights from industry leaders, real-world success stories, and strategies to help you navigate the road to profitability. Whether you're just getting started or looking to take your fleet to the next level, this is the show where trucking meets opportunity. So buckle up, it's time to go the distance. Welcome back to The Long Haul, the show where we go beyond the headlines and get into the real stories, real strategies, and real lessons from the real people who are moving the industry forward. I'm your host, Adam Wingfield, and whether you're behind the wheel, you're in the office, or you're just trying to figure out your next move in this business, this podcast is built and designed for you. This episode is powered by our partners at SiriusXM, the platform that keeps carriers connected, informed, and entertained, whether you're running solo operations or managing a growing fleet. We appreciate their support in bringing these conversations to life. Today's guest, I'm excited to be beside the glue guy. And it's the guy that I really want you to pay close attention to it. He's been sitting in a different seat, and sometimes you want to consider it the hot seat. But today's episode is really peeling back the curtain and really seeing what it goes on behind that broker seat. So let's get into it. As always, take what you hear, apply it, run your business like you got something to protect. Welcome to the show today. Broker Insights with Mr. Coleman Ruffin. Coleman with Talent Solvers. What's up, Coleman?
Hey, Adam, it's good to be here. And you hit the nail on the head. One thing that I'm hoping that we're going to be able to provide to some of the smaller carriers, owner-operators that are out there is just value. If we can provide any kind of value, then that's a huge win on our part. So I appreciate you having me on.
No, I love having you there. And, I met you, I think it's been a couple of years now I've had the opportunity to meet you through the summit and obviously in your work out in the industry. Let's go back a little bit though. Let's take you before the Talent Solvers times. I want to go back to, you worked for, I don't know, you guys want to consider the largest 3PL in the world. You spent some time with C.H. Robinson. So let's go back there and just kind of tell us a little bit about your journey back then. What did that time, that brokerage teach you about the real inner workings of freight?
Yeah, it taught me, I would say, everything that I really know today. It really set that foundation. And working for a large broker like that was a phenomenal experience. Now in a smaller company, I like to get the feel for both, but it was great. And it kind of fell into my lap straight out of college. So I was going to school at DePaul University in Chicago. I feel like a lot of people, how you get into logistics, I feel like is one of two ways, right? Your whole family was for generations has been into it, and then you go in, or it kind of just falls into your lap. And I was in the latter portion of that, where a buddy of mine said, hey, you should just apply to this job. It was the first job I applied to, ended up getting the gig, and the rest was history from there. But it was a great experience being able to really get an in-depth dive into what a world-class brokerage is and how it operates, and really what it's really kind of brought to the industry.
So, what was your very, very first role when you walked into that glass door of the largest brokerage in North America? What was that first assignment? Say, okay, Coleman, this is what you get to do.
Yeah. So it was interesting how they had things set up. And I was very fortunate to be able to wear several different hats during my tenure while working there. But the very first day is that they had a pretty intensive training program, which was amazing, right? Like they expose you to multiple facets of the business, get your hands dirty. But my first role and what I was hired on to do was be an account executive. So I know you had Dan Lindsay on this podcast, founder of the Broker Summit. He was talking about some of his days working at a big brokerage, and I was in a very similar seat where I was doing the 100 cold calls a day and getting hung up on and yelled at and all of that fun stuff, which was definitely a grind. But I think it builds some resiliency, which is something that I really think that and genuinely think that you need in this industry. But I was there to bring in new business, and I was fortunate enough to be fairly successful in that seat until the next opportunity within that company came to be. But yeah, I was the person where you're getting that random call that you don't know the phone number, trying to solicit you some business. That was me for about 2.5 years there.
So let's let's peel that onion layer back just a little bit, because you
Yeah,
brought up a very, very important component that maybe a small carrier doesn't recognize. And I want to walk in parallel a little bit so they understand the process a little bit. That account
yeah,
executive, you're literally going through a Yellow Pages back then, Google, and you're looking for shippers, and you're calling 100 or more a day just so you can get the opportunity to have a conversation and potentially work business. Am I right or wrong?
that's 100% it. That's literally it. And I was even going to Google Maps and looking at just anything, any warehousing area that had trucks outside of it. I'm like, oh, I'm going to give them a call and just
Yeah.
see what we can kind of peel back there.
But you know, and you know, and I want to make a point here, and we're going to dig in a lot more as we go. But you made 100 calls a day. If I'm a
Yeah,
small carrier or owner operator and I'm trying to book freight, my competition is making 100 calls every single day, 5 days of the week. Well, you know, most of them, you got 5 days a week. So, and
yep,
that's just you. And there's account
yeah,
executives do it. So, couldn't imagine the volume of, and that's what I'm saying. Like when it comes down to, as a small carrier, they may not see that that's part of the process. A lot of folks think that it's just like, hey, they got loads that they throw on the load board and they're making, 30, 40% margins on them, but they just don't see that part.
yeah. And you can look at it in one of two different ways. So you kind of brought it up where it could be thought of as competition, right? In our office alone, we had, I think, 1,200 people. Now, was everybody an account executive? No. But that's just giving you the sheer volume and idea of what our office in and of itself was just doing. And I think that where this comes into play and in tandem with small carriers and owner operators is that you should look at brokerages or should be able to hopefully find brokerages that have a good reputation and brand that are really an extension of your business. Because the second that you as an owner operator are having to sit there and do 100 cold calls to land one client and you do that day in and day out, that's a huge time suck. And there's already so many inefficiencies where drivers and owner operators and carriers aren't getting paid for the time, whether they're sitting there in detention or dwell or whatever it might be. You need to be as efficient and effective with your time as you can. So that's where the brokerage, in my opinion, should come into play, is that they are, again, an extension of your sales.
You started in sales, with the account executive role, and then you ended up training new hires on ops and strategy. What did those early reps teach you about how brokers are actually trained to think about carriers?
Yeah. Um, it taught me a lot. And I think that I've been a fan of long haul and watched a bunch of episodes. And I think that this kind of ties into your episode with Avante Jackson, just in terms of training. And I think that when I was brought on, there has always been the big stigma between brokers and carriers. And even internally, if you look at it from account executives and carrier reps, right? It wasn't seen as, hey, we're all moving in the same direction. Let's all figure out ways to win. It was more so about, hey, this side of the business screwed up again, whether it's broker or carrier.
Mhm.
How can we put the blame on them? And as I was transitioning into training a lot of the new hires, I wanted to try and change that stigma. So something that we had a very large emphasis on, and again, Avante did a phenomenal job of touching on it when you were interviewing with him, but really getting in depth and understanding the full life cycle of what your role does and how it affects everybody else in the business. So you even touched on it when you were talking about carriers not necessarily maybe knowing that I, just as an account executive, to get one load and making 100 cold calls. But if you start to understand the different pieces of this puzzle, everything gets really put together and you can understand and empathize where the other side of the business is coming. So I would say, at least when I transitioned more into that L&D side of things, yes, my job was to set people up for success in terms of setting that foundation. But it was really more so about understanding where their job and role fit into that entire picture, because then you can really empathize with others. So we had a big emphasis on putting people through every facet of the business. So even if you were coming on just as an account executive,
Mm.
we made sure you sat in that carrier sales seat. We made sure that you did tracking and tracing calls so you can understand what you're doing, how it trickles down to everybody else. So it was a really big picture type of idea.
So let's get into it. What's something that brokers know internally that most carriers have no clue about when it comes down to it? That, you get on the phone with a caller and it's just something that a broker knows that internally that most carriers have no clue about.
Yeah, I would say it's really everything behind the scenes. In right, like we were kind of just talking about it, but you can talk to me, right? If you're a carrier and you need help with getting a delivery appointment or something, hey, call me. I'm your point of contact. It sometimes is really as easy as just, hey, oh, there was a miscommunication. Here's when your actual appointment is. But if there wasn't, then it's my job to then figure out all necessary parties internally to figure out
Mhm.
how we can then resolve a problem. So it's really everything that's going on behind the scenes. And I think that's really the case with almost any service based industry. Would it be, it would be awesome if you can just call one person and then the problem's always resolved. But there's usually so many different people that are involved with that process. And again, if we're looking at it from a broker standpoint, if I'm a carrier, I call my carrier rep for some issue that's going on. That carrier rep then needs to log it within the system, needs to reach out to the account management team who usually owns the relationship with the customer. Maybe there's another internal person that owns a relationship with the warehouse to get things resolved. So there's so many different moving pieces. I think that that's really probably one of the biggest misconceptions. And again, it's going back to why if you find a brokerage or broker that works well with you and you trust, know that they're going to do what's necessary to get the job done, as opposed to, again, they get a call with a problem and they're just hoping it's going to resolve itself. They're going to take the necessary actions internally to make sure that you're taken care of.
So when a small carrier sees a load posted on a load board, what's already happened before that post goes live? What don't they see?
Yeah. I mean, let's start from the beginning. I would say the initial prospecting, like we were just talking about for me as an account executive, where I'm spending probably 2, 3 hours a day of just building a list. Let's say a list of
Just the list.
just a list of 200 to 250 people that I think might be moving freight. Now, especially with the CH Robinson, it gets a little bit harder because it was so saturated. It was harder to find some of those leads. Might be a little bit different at some of the smaller brokerages, but let's say 2 to 3 hours just to find the prospects. Then I would say another 2 to 3 hours to start hammering out those cold calls. 100 cold calls, I would say generally about, yeah, 3 hours of the day, right? Maybe 30% of them pick up. Maybe of that 30%, half of them hang up on you, and then you start to get into actual conversations. But if you look at it right there, that's 6 hours of the day just to find one shipment to potentially move or even quote, right? Like we get the opportunity and they're like, okay, yeah, here's an opportunity on a shipment. Then we internally need to figure out the best way to quote it to make sure that, obviously the brokerage is making money and hopefully keeping in mind that the carrier is still making money at that side of things. Once we negotiate on a price, then we're doing the whole internal dance of building the shipment and then starting to go to market to a carrier. So as soon as they see it on a load board, there's hours and hours and hours and hours of effort that goes into one single load.
And you train brokers on how to build books of businesses as well. How much of that training focuses on maximizing spread? So that's where how should carriers really kind of approach that when they're negotiating their rates?
Yeah. So what I would say is maximizing spread to making sure that everybody is still operating effectively and everybody's happy. That is a very, very hard line to walk, right? How I always recommended it to people is yes, utilizing the tools that we have to see what the market is dictating. But I think it goes just as important externally as it is internally. But for me as an account executive, what I would try to do is before I would even quote any shipments, I would look at our internal carriers and internal carrier partners of ours,
Mhm.
and then I would go to market to them. And I would say, hey, Adam, you're a carrier rep at CH Robinson. I know that you've run this lane with a couple different carriers before. I want to make sure that we are doing right by them while still doing right by us at the same time. How can we get this business to make sure that your carriers are happy, that you're happy, and our customers happy? So I would always recommend to try to do everybody's due diligence to actually understand what it's going to take to move a shipment before just throwing out a random number. Because the second that you say, "Oh yeah, we can get this Chicago to Atlanta shipment done for $1,500," and then we get the load posted and it's actually dictating $1,700 or $1,800. It makes you look bad to your customer, but then also it gives us as the brokerage a bad reputation to carriers. Because if you're a carrier on the load board and you see, man, this is way under market, these guys are trying to gouge us the prices or whatever it is, it's just a bad look overall. So really making sure to hammer home those relationships and start building out that internal network and external network for that matter to make sure that you're doing things appropriately.
And now, what role does a carrier's behavior, performance play behind the scenes when it comes down to whether they get consistent freight, they're getting cut off? Yeah, what does that tie into?
I would say that is almost everything.
Everything.
Service, yeah, service and reliability is at the core of any service-based industry, right? If you aren't reliable or not good with communication, that's something that's obviously you need to fix in order to start earning additional freight. But us as brokerages always knew carriers that had a bad reputation or bad brand because they would always show up late or because their trucks weren't clean when they needed to be food grade trailers or what dropped off loads last minute consistently. So from a reliability and overall branding perspective, that is everything. And that's something that I'm super passionate about now is that I think that we're all not only building our personal brands, but that in turn then goes to our company brands. And that genuinely carries over. I don't want to throw any companies under the name, but we all know
Sure.
some brokerages out there that have a bad reputation or bad brand. And I mean, I know that you probably know this too. There are carriers that will never work with them again
Yeah.
because of whatever happened and that reputation that they've built. So I would say the coin gets flipped on both sides. As a carrier, if you're reliable and you communicate well, I think that it's going to do night and day difference for your business in making sure that you're getting that repeatable freight.
So what are some of those quiet signals when you think about it? And brokers are obviously they're using vetting tools these days. You got your carrier
Yep.
411s, your carrier assures, your highways. But what are some of the quiet tools that I guess you would say those intuitive tools or signals that brokers use to vet whether a carrier is safe to give that load to, even if the MC is new?
Yeah. Uh, First and foremost, I love all the tools that are coming out. I think all the tools and technology that's coming in the industry, some of it's scary, but I think realistically, it's all there to make us better.
It's necessary.
Um, it's necessary, 100%. I realistically think, and maybe I'm a little bit old school, but I think that talking with somebody goes
Hmm.
night and day. I mean, you
Hmm.
can change the course of any relationship. And I know you had, I think his name was Brian Woodard on the show too, and he talked about the impact of a broker carrier summit. But getting face to face time, or even just on a call, to understand where somebody's coming from and what's a little bit outside of just what a report is showing you is the biggest differentiator. And I think that again, this goes back a little bit to your personal brand, right? If I mean, not to say that I have a game changing personal brand or anything like that, but with a lot of people in our industry, if I reached out to them and said, "Hey, I need help with this," or "I wanted to pick your brain on this," they probably have seen or heard of me again, whether it's at Broker Carrier Summit or just something posting online. It just helps add some additional credibility. So going back to your original question in terms of what are some of those things that happen outside of just again the highways carrier shares that are
Yeah.
out there is truly building up your brand, and that is something that's going to help add reputation to you but also just help separate yourself from some of the competition that's out there and hopefully again earn more or earn additional business when that time comes.
And I love the fact that you said separate yourself from your competition because what many carriers don't realize is that your competition is truly the next small carrier that's beside you that's bidding on the same exact freight. What makes you different than the next carrier is really, really important to set yourself up amongst the others. So truly,
Yep.
from your perspective, looking at it from your experience, being in that broker seat, what separates those carriers who get repeat business that broker might reach out and say, "Hey, I got a dedicated lane that's coming up. I'm gonna call Adam first because" what is
Yeah.
that separates those carriers who get that from the ones that just get one and dones, or you call in, you get a load, or there's nothing to it? What's the secret sauce?
Yeah, there are so many things that I can point to, and I think that it really is a culmination of several. But if I was going to say one thing, And this seems so intuitive and so simplistic that I almost hate to say it, but it really comes down to communication, right? If the second that communication falls apart from a carrier to a broker, from a broker to a carrier internally at brokerages, that's when everything falls apart. If anything happens during transit, if you just give them a call, we can plan accordingly as long as we're in the know. A perfect example for this, one of the first kind of high value shipments that I earned when I was in my young buck days over at
Mm-hmm.
Robinson. It was a Saturday pickup, Saturday delivery. It was a hot shipment that needed to get out, and I worked with a carrier who I'd never worked with before. I was doing everything at this point. And I think I get a call at, it was must have been 10:30 or so on that Saturday, about 2 hours after he picked up, and he said, "Hey, Coleman, I got a problem. My truck just started smoking. I'm pulled over to the side of the road. This is where I'm at. This is what's going on. I got these parties involved." And I said, "Hey, first and foremost, are you good?" Like, I wanted to make sure he was safe.
Yeah.
But I'm like, "Thank you for this, for telling me, because then now I can actually start going behind the scenes and seeing what we need to do. Do we need to get a new carrier in there to transload and actually start get the shipment up there? Can the receiver then wait a couple extra hours? Roughly how long is it going to take him to get fixed?" All of this. So at the core foundation of everything that we're doing, communication is that. And if you can keep up with communication to help us as brokers be a little bit more proactive, even though it's technically still reactive, if we can just get ahead of that, that's when it's going to be beneficial to everybody.
Now, so with that being said, can you speak about how reputation and how fast reputation travels through a brokerage, whether it be how does fast news spread about a bad carrier or a great carrier? Does that, like, I'm a bad carrier, does that get does that shoot through it like a wildfire, or how does that work?
Oh yeah. And most of these tend to be when things go either terribly wrong or terribly right in terms of when it goes through wildfire. But in that instance, I would tell everybody to work with that one carrier on that first load that I moved, even though it didn't go very smoothly. But I was like, "Hey, listen, this is the best that I can ask for." I mean, he sent me pictures, everything, but it travels insanely fast. And again, more so when things go really poorly. Another great example of that is that of course, this is another one of my shipments. I promised I had a lot of things that did go well. But I had a shipment that I was moving across the country. It was supposed to be a couple days transit. And by the time that the carrier is supposed to be at the receiver, I get a call and said that the carrier didn't show up for their delivery appointment. So I called the carrier trying to figure out what's going on. A little bit of back and forth. He said, "Oh, he'll be there tomorrow. He had a breakdown." Okay, fine. So be it. Yeah, I wish that you would have told me that a little bit sooner. But okay, so I get everything fixed with the receiver. Then the same thing happens the next day where they don't show up again for the delivery appointment. And the carrier, then I talk with them and they say, "Oh, yeah, we couldn't get out of the shop in time. It should be fixed tomorrow." So we're going through this whole song and dance. And what was supposed to be a 3 to 4 day transit, or excuse me, 4 day transit, ended up turning into a week and a half. And what we had found out happened is that the carrier, in order to try and save a couple bucks, then took the shipment that I contracted them out to move over the road, and they put it on the rail system. The rail then
Mm.
broke down halfway across the country, and then that's what was actually taking super long to actually get the rail back, or the train car up and running. And then again, it finally ended up getting there, albeit very late. But that was something that I was telling people internally, like, "Man, what's going on? How did this happen?" So people then were looking for me once the problem actually got solved and the shipment was delivered. I was saying, "What happens?" Like, and I told them this whole story. And that was one of those instances where I would say 90% of our office, at least, so again, 1,200 people, and within our systems, knew about that and weren't going to work with that carrier again because of the smoke and mirrors, I guess.
Wow. And yeah, I think that that happens, it happens on both sides too. You got, carriers
For
that,
sure.
use that and it becomes the same situation. They just don't have that, integrated platform to do that at the time. But I think that that's important that, that reputation is understood and communication, like you said, if something happens on a load, just, call. Being proactive in communication, you can never over communicate. And it's super important as a small carrier that is building your brand reputation is that you do those things. And I appreciate the conversation around that. It kind of takes me back, Coleman, to I'll never forget, man. I was, this was kind of in my pre-entrepreneurial days, and I was working at a 3PL at one time. I won't say the name of them, but you can pretty much read between the lines. And I'll never forget. I had the opportunity to work there, get an understanding on what it looks like behind the scenes. And I'll never forget, man. One time I went to lunch on the south side of Charlotte.
Yep.
This particular broker has an office in Charlotte that's not far from where I went to go lunch at. And I was sitting there by myself, and it was a group. There was probably maybe about 4 or 5 of them sitting off to the left of me. And this is an honest to God true story. And I can hear every word that they're saying, but obviously I'm not ear hustling. I'm just trying to eat. And they were talking about how much money that they made on their loads for that day. They were saying, "Oh, this load paid this, and I only had to pay the carrier that." And that type of conversation and how they were going back and the excitement behind it obviously paints that negative light when it comes down to that. My question to you is around one of the hottest topics that has been spread through the industry since deregulation, which has
Yep.
been the broker transparency.
Yeah.
What are being on both sides of the table? What are your feelings about broker transparency? Being that you get the opportunity to see both sides.
Yeah. It's interesting. So I've heard and I've actually argued for both sides before, just because for sake of conversation. My personal opinion is that it's not something that's necessary. Now, taking what you said just a hair back, right? I think that the brokerage space is getting over hopefully, knock on wood, the phase of being like the Wolf of Wall Street, right? For
Yeah.
those that have seen it, you kind of
Yeah.
understand that, oh man, I made X amount of money and like screw the person that I'm working with. And I think for right, wrong, or indifferent, and I mean, I disagree with it, but I think that that's what our industry was for a while. Is literally just saying, hey, how can I maximize as much money as I can on this specific shipment? And I'm going to keep doing that over and over and over again to look out for myself and then nobody else. I would like to think that things are somewhat changing. So again, going back to your question, I don't think that it's something that's necessary as long as you are working with people that you know and trust. And I think that there's that mutually, unspoken rule or mutual agreement there of saying, hey, listen, I'm going to make sure that you are doing what you need to succeed. You are happy. I'm then going to, go behind the scenes and do what I need to do to make sure that I'm succeeding and happy. And it kind of trickles down from there. So do I think it's something that we should do? I personally do not. But I think at the very core of that is that everybody needs to make sure that they're taking care of others. An interesting way that we were kind of just bringing this full circle to some of the stuff that we're doing now. We were just talking about our core values here internally, and one of the main ones that came up is people first. Like, do right by the people that you're working with, and it will come full circle. I think that the second that there is broker transparency, it's going to minimize the amount of effect that brokers can have, just from hey, if everybody knows what every broker out there is going after, are people actually going to be willing to pay? Let's say a carrier, maybe a broker makes $150 on a shipment. Are they going to go to the next broker over that's only making $100 on a shipment, that then puts $50 into the carrier's pocket, but then maybe the service isn't as good, the communication isn't there, delivery, pickup appointments aren't set? I just think that it's a little bit of a slippery slope. And I think that as long as all parties are happy, my personal opinion is that that's how it should be. And again, I would like to believe at the core of everybody that people want to do good and don't want to take advantage of others. I know that for a long time, again, that hasn't happened. And I think that there are still those people out there, but I would like to believe in the good in people in that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you talked about the whole Wolf of Wall Street approach, and I definitely see the difference in brokerages. Going back to when I operated to now, it's different. It definitely is different. You still have those brokerages that continue to carry that reputation. That's unfortunate. That it's very difficult to transform those reputations because you still have some of these instances festering up. So, what are some ways a small carrier itself can stand out to a broker, even if it's a new carrier or a new broker or new relationships outside of communication, which you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, I think it's how to be a true partner, right? And I think that from a carrier and carrier rep perspective, if we're looking internally at a brokerage, everybody should be looking at their carrier partners as just that, as partners. So, as much as a carrier rep should be asking an owner operator and saying, hey, after a shipment is done, what else would you like? Where do you want to go? Like, was this good service? Was that a good rate for you? How can we help continue and grow your business? I realistically think that if a carrier asks that to a carrier rep, that's going to
Mm.
immediately separate them. And it's going to help in turn grow their business too. But saying, hey, this shipment was great. Are there any more of these that you're doing? Or what other business have you been trying to work on that maybe I can help, actually transport for you to help grow your business? The We talked a little bit about this right when we started on the show. I think that if you go into any conversation trying to add value to somebody else, trying to make their life a little bit easier, that's what's going to help set you apart from everybody else that's out there. So, you as a carrier, next time you finish a shipment, talking with a carrier rep, saying, hey, I just delivered this. Here's some general feedback. What else are you working on? Like, how else can I be of service? That's going to be something that's very different than I think that what a lot of carriers are doing out there.
Coleman, you also mentioned in the beginning, you mentioned the part of, personal brands and building your business brand and helping those brands grow. What does building a brand mean in small carrier environments and trucking from a broker's perspective?
Yeah, that can really be anything and everything. I know this sounds ridiculous, but you as your brand, the second that you aren't authentic, that's when I think things are going to fall off. I mean, if we're just talking about from my seat and things that I've been served on social media, I mean, I've been served several things of people just doing their normal day-to-day life as a carrier actually. One of them is talking about the struggles of finding, secured parking and like how they lock up their truck every single night because they don't know exactly where they're parked. And again, that's something that's resonated with me. Similar thing. I'm a little bit of a nerd and I love video games, but like I've followed people on social medias about their personal brand being on the road and then playing video games, like in their
Mhm.
updating just what's going on in their life, talking about how different warehouses treat people and the facilities there. And literally some social media platforms and people built their brand about rating these warehouses. And it's just a day in the life. So when I say building a brand, it doesn't mean, oh man, like this is my business and I'm absolutely crushing it. I think people want to see an authentic person that's there. They want to hear about the struggles. Do they want to hear about the success? Absolutely. But if you look at any good story, no good story doesn't have a struggle. There has to be some sort of struggle. So be authentic when you're building a brand. And it doesn't need to be something that you feel like is going to, I don't know, change the world. It's something that you feel like you're adding kind of to the platform that's out there.
So, from your perspective, in your mind, do you think that small carriers see themselves as truly as brands or just trucks? What mindset shift needs to happen for them to grow sustainably?
Yeah, I think that most small carriers and owner operators see themselves as trucks. I almost view my social media presence and things like this as me being with my friends, right? Like if you ask any of my friends, they would tell you X, Y, Z about me, and that's what I'm trying to convey to everybody out there. I genuinely think that your network is probably one of the most important things that you can have in any industry. So again, for an owner operator small carrier, it's being authentic and being yourself, but also just trying to get out there a little bit more. And again, I know we've talked a little bit about it before, but the Broker Carrier Summit, that's why things like that are important because you can start to show face and start to say, hey, this is who I am. This is why you'd want to be working with me. So to answer your question again, I think a lot of people see themselves as just, hey, this is my business. This is a truck. I just got to go, 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 go. But sometimes you got to play the long game. And the building the brand is really playing a long game.
So, if a small carrier can come inside and sit in a broker's bullpen for 1 week, what do you think would shock them the most? What would be that thing that's like, hey, you know what? If you sat in this seat for a week, what do you think an owner operator would say, wow? What would that be?
Yeah. Really quick, conversely, I would say that every broker should go to a carrier as well
100%.
and sit in their shoes.
Sit in
Like
the truck.
anybody that's not doing that is doing a disservice to the space. Um, Speaking, I guess, from my end, and again, and coming from an office of 1,200 people, if a carrier came into our office and sat there for a week, it would truly blow their mind of just everything that's going on to get to before the point of when a carrier moves a shipment. And again, this is the exact same thing that we talked about, but I just think that when we're talking about broker transparency from a rate standpoint, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think from a training standpoint, there should be transparency around what's going on throughout the entire process. So somebody comes in, and I'm just thinking about our Chicago Central office. I guarantee the first thing that would happen, and we've had carriers come in and they say, wow, this is insane, right? 1,200 people all on one floor that were just talking, hammering the phones, whatever was going on. I think it would really surprise them to see the true operation that's running behind things. All of the people that it really takes to then trickle down to, again, that one carrier and that one shipment. And if they were there for a week, I guarantee that they would look at things very differently, which would then in turn help their business. Because again, they would see what's going on behind the scenes. I think that they would be empathetic to certain things that are happening, but they would also say, similar to what we were talking about before, of, hey, how can I help continue and grow your business? Because I was there, I was sitting in your seat, I understand what you're going through. I think really in the end, from not only a knowledge perspective, but an emotional standpoint, empathy is probably one of the biggest things that we can have in our space as well. If you're
Absolutely.
empathetic for a carrier that is stuck over the weekend and they're trying to figure out where to eat or whatever, if you can help them out for that. If you're empathetic for your carrier up on the phone that had a bad day for whatever reason, that's huge. So I think that is part of what you would get out of that experience, is understanding what goes on behind the scenes like we were talking about, but also being able to empathize when things aren't necessarily going right, hoping and realizing that it's not your partner's fault, it's something else that's going on internally and they're working to fix it.
The crazy thing is, Coleman, when you was talking about, hey, I think that on the adverse side, brokers should go sit in a carrier seat for a week. It's crazy you said that and that you mentioned that. I remember, and I won't say where I was speaking at. I was speaking in the last year. I spoke at a group. It was a large group of brokers from a carrier perspective, obviously. And then I asked them, I was like, okay, how many people in here, by show of hands, how many people in here live near truck stops? And the room was for everybody, I would say at least 75% of the room, everybody raised their hand, right? And I want you to keep your hand up. Those 75%, I want you to keep your hand up. And I want you to keep your hand up. And I want to know everyone that who lives by a truck stop ever took a shower inside of a truck stop before. And it was probably 5% of the hands that remained at
Yeah.
that point. And you talked about empathy and being empathetic. One of the simplest things to be able to communicate better with somebody is to identify what they deal with on a day-to-day basis, right? So the more I
Yep.
could understand what you go through and the more that I can understand what your day looks like, the more I can have a better conversation with you. And we may not have the same backgrounds, but the more that I try to identify, the better off our conversations and our partnership can become. So for the brokers that are listening to this, if you live near a truck stop, go take a shower. Just go get some shower
Oh, yeah.
shoes. Go take a hey, you ain't gotta spend a night. That's another story.
Yeah.
Try spending the night at a truck stop, right?
Oh,
But
yeah.
the first step is, man, just go take a shower. See what they have, see what the driver has to deal with at 5 o'clock when you're done with a long shift and you just want to take a shower. And then there's a wait and you got to sit there and there's so many things that a broker doesn't see. But on the same side, there's a lot of things that carriers don't see too. But
Yeah.
in order for us
Yeah.
to better be able to work together, we got to better understand each other, right?
100% agree. And I'll even take it one step prior to going to a truck stop and showering, or again, a carrier sitting in a broker seat. Ask the question. I mean, that's just ask what's going on. Like,
Yeah.
what was your day like today? And getting just that even surface level understanding of what they're going through helps add to everything that you were just talking about. And I mean, another example of that, of just in the end dealing with humans, and let's put people first. is I remember there was a carrier that got into an altercation with a warehouse, was cursing them out. And the warehouse called our team and was like, hey, you need to get this person out of here, yada, yada, yada. And we talked with the carrier, like, hey, what's going on? Like, what happened? And he's like, this might be a little bit TMI, but he was on the road for a long time. He really needed to use the bathroom, and they refused to let him use the bathroom. And he's like, I literally, I'll let him hear. I'm just sitting here, right? You're unloading my truck. I'm not doing anything. And then it kind of stirred up this whole thing. But right, if you just talk to one party or you didn't understand where the carrier is coming from, I mean, that's a basic human necessity.
Yeah.
How are we not
Yeah.
allowing somebody just to use the restroom at a warehouse? So, right, I 100% agreed with the carrier, and they had a policy. I guess it was employees only, but still, at that point, I would prefer not to work with a warehouse like that again, that doesn't see the person for an actual person, not just like, hey, this is employees only, you can't utilize our restroom. So I think it's again, taking your comment one step further, is just asking the questions of just what their experience is like, because it'll help add a lot of context to, again, the entire picture.
So let's move forward a little bit and tell me about solvers. Tell me
Yeah.
tell me what you do. Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about what that's all about.
Yeah, so I would say, if we're going to boil it down to a quick little spiel, we're a retained executive recruitment firm that operates really at the intersection of technology and supply chain. So we have always been passionate about, since the inception of our company, about working in supply chain and logistics and finding the best talent for the best teams to really grow successful companies. But then what's been really cool about it over the last several years is this injection of technology. So I would say we operate right at the intersection of those two. And our whole goal is to really make sure that anybody out there gets their critical hires right. Because I'm a firm believer in this. I know the people in our firm are a firm believer in this. But if you hire the wrong person, that's
Oh
not
yeah.
just lost money, but that is something that trickles throughout an organization. And an easy example of that is a sports team, right? You can have some of the best players in the world, but if you have that one person that's a prima donna and then just
Yeah.
toxic to the culture, you're not going to build a successful organization. So that's where really we like to operate.
That's amazing. But the bigger thing behind that is that where you're at is kind of just a journey, step in a journey from where you started. Like it all
Yeah,
started in freight, but it started at the ground floor of freight. So it started, hey,
exactly.
I can resonate with that because I've done these things. I've done
Yep.
these different roles. So I think that that's really really important to call out. Any final
Yeah.
advice for a small carrier that's trying to stop chasing one-off freight and needs to start building relationships with brokers that truly, truly last from your experience based on, what you've done, and what you've accomplished in the last decade?
Yeah. The two main things that I would say are building a brand. And this is the marketer, the internal marketer on my
Yeah.
side. You should be posting on social media. You should be giving people an insight into your life in terms of what your business is like. A quick little segue from that is that I'm not huge on sharing my personal life on LinkedIn or socials, but I talk about business and what's going on in the space and all of that. So you can find that sweet spot. But building your brand is going to be one of the biggest things that you can do. And then a close second that kind of does lead into that is putting yourself out there. Finding these events that you can go out to and start making introductions and say, hey, my name's Coleman, I run this company. It's just me right now, but looking to grow and looking to add additional headcount, really getting out there and putting faces to names and growing your network. Those two things, from a networking and a brand perspective, that's what's going to set you apart from everybody else. And that's what's going to be the long term strategy to grow.
The crazy thing about that is that our industry is so fragmented, but it's so close. Yeah,
Yep.
and the reason why I say that is that I really truly believe in the power of relationships and networking, which is
Yep.
why I go to events and things like that and connect. And I've learned that I'm an introvert, but I have to pretend that I'm an extrovert in order to benefit from those extrovert type of benefits. But the
Yep.
most important thing is that you have to get out. I don't care if you're an owner operator, small carrier, you have to plan for these events. So if there's a trucking event that's in August, go ahead and start planning now. Start putting seed money down to the side and putting it away in a mattress or whatever you got to do for right now, so that way you can park your truck for a day or two. So that way you can
Yep.
meet the Colemans, you can meet the Adams, you can meet these people that, you know what, that can potentially connect you with the next person, that can connect you with the next person. And like we talked about in the beginning of the call, those connections are the ones that get you the repeat, they get you direct, they get you dedicated. Whereas the other stuff, you really kind of like, yeah, we'll just do this one off. So I appreciate you
Yeah.
bringing that to the table.
Yeah, and I would say everything that we do, and especially cares, I would argue cares almost more than anybody. Everything you do is a function of time and making sure that there is that ROI there. I think that what you just said of putting money aside and spending a day or two off the road, that is probably going to be one of the highest impact ROIs that a carrier can actually do. And nobody's doing. Again, I know that the broker carrier summit's out there, but if we're looking at even Manifest, which is maybe a little bit probably outside of where just an owner operator might want to go, but that's what 5,000 6,000 people out of a multi-million person industry. That is a very small percentage of people that are actively going to some of these conferences, actively putting themselves out there, and I can guarantee that it's going to change the game for some.
100%, 100%. And then, here's the thing that, it may be just that one. I might go 3 days and meet one person that completely changed my business, because it's like with anything, any business is one deal away from changing that business. Any decision
Very
that
much
you
so.
make in life is one decision from changing your life. So it's all
Yeah.
about the power of proximity. And you
Yep.
are a CEO of a company, whether you're the CEO of a single truck owner operator, you're the CEO of a small brokerage firm, or you're an account executive rep for for one of the largest brokerages in the world. Those relationships matter, and I'm glad that you took the time today and really kind of talked about it, talked about a little bit behind the broker curtain. I really appreciated that conversation, and really had the opportunity to really kind of dig into that. So thank you for so much for the conversation today.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for having me. This stuff is always a blast. Obviously, talking to one of our industry leaders here too. And again, in the end, I hope that one owner operator out there can take at least one piece of value from this conversation, and then it was 100% worth it. And if not, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, or however you want to get in touch with me, and I'll do my best to make sure that I am adding value.
Well, you did half of my closing part for me.
Oh,
How can everybody reach out to you? How can they find you?
yeah. So LinkedIn, Coleman Ruffin, that's one of the best. Otherwise, my cell phone number, please don't blow me up with text, but this is it, 925-787-3679, or just Coleman at talentsolvers.com. Those are the three best ways to get a hold.
Man, that was awesome. Man, this truly was a great conversation. I really enjoyed our dialogue. Never had the opportunity to kind of talk to you
Yeah.
that in that depth, and really appreciated that conversation today,
Yeah.
and hoping that we have these conversations going forward as we go down. So listen, in this conversation today, we talked about relationships versus transactions. We talked about how to bridge the gap. We talked about being your brand, building that growth and getting serious. We talked about the importance of communications and bringing value all together. And most importantly, we talked about separating yourselves from the rest of your competition and how that can take you to the next level. So thank you for joining us, myself and Coleman Ruffin, on this particular episode of The Long Haul. I'm looking forward to seeing you next week. Be safe, be profitable, and until the next time, take care.